Good evening, everyone. If you can't hear at the back, just put your hand up. I've been asked to do 50 years in 50 minutes, so this is going to be quite a rush. But I want to try and get across the idea that the Cyclebag, which was a small cycling campaign group in the 70s, really one way or the other has done quite a lot. And it was all based here in Bristol. In fact, a lot of us lived in this part of Bristol. So I hope you've all, now I also am aware that probably every single person in this room has either worked on the project or used the routes. And so if I get things wrong and I forget the dates or I forget who designed Ashton Park or something like that, for heaven's sake, jump up and put me right. We'll also probably put the slides on the website afterwards if you want to stare for hours at you when you were 3 years old or something. Anyway, I hope you all know where this is. This is the map of the National Cycle Network, which is on We the Curious, and if I think one of the makers is here, I don't know if anyone is, but it was certainly made by Marion Tucker and friends to mark the work at 2000. So I'm going to take you back through Cyclebag, which is a campaign group, Sustainable Transport, which was our trading company, then Sustrans, which was a charity based in King Street, and then finally Greenways, which is the charity that Caroline here and myself are building paths with at the moment. And so we need to go back, believe it or not, 50 years. And I was an engineer in Bristol 50 years ago. There were no cycle routes in Bristol at all. The only cycle route in this part of the country was on the Severn Bridge, which wasn't much good for journeys to school and things. And so we did a little study, a few of us, to see what we could do in Bristol. And the only decent path in Bristol that was flat was the Chocolate Box Walk, on which cycling was banned. So we put little signs up to say it was all right. And so this was the start of direct action. Anyway, by 1977, there was the Arab oil embargoes, and Friends of the Earth and others were very worried about oil running out. And they started a campaign group, which in Bristol we christened Cyclebag. And this is looking towards the cathedral, and those of you who don't remember, will remember the A4 from London to Fishguard, went right past the entrance to the cathedral. You can see cars on the road there. And George, who's here, I think, invented Cyclebag, and it's not an obvious name because it stands for Channel Your Car from Leg Energy into the Bristol Action Group. So that's how it came about. Anyway, George organised these various demonstrations around town. This was in the first winter of '77. And this was all to try and persuade the council that we really had to do something for cyclists and indeed for walkers. And the only result of this was the council prevented us doing this next year by planting all the trees. So that was pretty hopeless. So we started going on tours around Europe. We went to Bremen, and we went to Bedford in England, which was the leading cycling town at the time. Just after we left, the cycling officer got fed up and set up a pizza bar, so that was the end of Bedford as a cycling town. But John in the front organised a trip to Bremen where he was working, in Bruges, pretty well anywhere that began with a B, really. And we started doing reports. The first report, in fact, we ever had was done by James Bruges for going up to the university up at Frome, and that was very posh. And the second one was done by a wonderful lady called Virginia Chainless, which I always quite liked, and she did a project for cycling between Bristol and Bath. And the idea was that we would recover the towpath of the canalised river, because until the Second World War, there was a towpath 3 metres wide all the way from Bath to Bristol, and the bridges of that towpath are still there. This is the one at Syston Brook. But unfortunately, I was a member of the Junior Chamber of Commerce at the time, for my sins, and the chairman of the Junior Chamber lived at Hannon Mills, and he took me to one side and said, "John, you're fired, it's coming past my house, it's never coming past my house." So that was the end of that, Chamber of Commerce. But fortunately, the same year, the Countryside Commission asked us to look at all the disused railways in Somerset. And so half a dozen people in this room, we all bicycled around, taking photographs and things. And one of the routes we looked at was Bristol to Bath on the old railway line, the Midland line. Now at the time this was owned by the wonderful Avon County, and Avon rented it to us for £1 a year, which was generous. And I happened to meet somebody from Clark's, the shoe firm, on a train, and he gave me £10,000 because I said we wanted to build a very rough path to wear out lots of shoes. And we bought in 1,600 tons of limestone dust, and we just drove these lorries up and down the ballast and tipping the dust out. It's all pretty rudimentary. We didn't really know what we were doing, and for the first month it didn't work because the dust just trickled away into the stone, and then somebody told us it had to be wet. Hadn't rained. So we ordered 2 pumps, and we switched the pumps on, pumping out of the Avon at Salford, and half an hour later the monsoons came. So we then had the rain, we just spread it with wheelbarrows, we used whatever slave labour we could find, and we had one complicated thing, a little bridge. This bridge is still here at Salford, and if any of you are keen on the history of the things, this is the first bridge that Cyclebag and what came after ever rebuilt. Anyway, by the time we got to the autumn of 1979, we had a path that was 8 kilometres long, packed with people, really, really popular, and we thought, right, we're going to do lots more of these wherever we can. And bear in mind, we were all just a bunch of volunteers at this time. And so one of our group rode a route the rest of the way from Bitton into Bath, slightly posher report. I should say the Bitton to Bath, 8 kilometres, the planning application document, that was 4 pages long. And of course that was a really simple way. This one is 18 pages long, running right through the middle of the urban area. We did no consultation at all except with Evening Post, who hated it. And we did some very nice drawings, and I've always been pleased with this one. You'll know this is Warmley Station, where they're the best traffic lights in Britain, or Bristol, because whenever you appear near them, they promptly stop for you and open up for you. Anyway, the railway was looking in quite good condition when we started, and this picture is really, really important because when the chairman of the council, this was Kingswood Council in those days, she led a party of the planners through the tunnel, and there was an inversion like today, and the tunnel was full of thick, thick fog. So they went through blindfolded, and when she came out, I said, "Did you enjoy it?" She said, "It was fantastic, but I tripped over something soft." And one of the councillors leapt forward and said, "That was me lying in a puddle." So we actually got it approved, and we took on 100 of these great labourers from the community programme. We were very lucky because the government was just starting to introduce programmes to the unemployed, and they gave us 100 people at a time. 3 years later, we had 800 people on this programme working for us around the country. I don't know how much work they did, but we did have a few problems with them. I remember the police called me out one day and said, "You've got to come, one of your men has got a knife." And I got out there, and this guy had a knife, brandishing it at the public, and I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Nobody has walked on the path I just built." So, nice people. And so we then, by 1982, we got all the way into Bristol, and this is what it looked like from Devon Road. It doesn't look like that nowadays, but you can see we've had events, bemused local people watching, and that's more or less the same picture today with the lights and the trees and so on. But I've always really been very pleased with this, because right at the top there you'll see the Tower of Temple Meads. So I've always liked the way the railway is sort of homing in on Temple Meads. And of course Cyclebag had a party in the tunnel. It went really well until somebody decided that the smoke effect would be very good, and they lit car towers all the way through, which was a serious smoke effect. But that was one of many parties that George and the others here organised. And I bought the railway bridge that goes over the main line to Birmingham, and this was the first of many bridges over the main line, so in fact I took a very long lease out on it. But very interestingly, if Cyclebag hadn't tackled this, then the path would have stopped at Owen Square, because Bristol Council refused to to take on the responsibility for this bridge. And so the campaign group was able to just go straight into the middle of Bristol, and a few of you may remember that it was a Channel 4 weekend when we had to build the whole of the rest of the way into Midland Road, really, in 4 working days under the blaze of the TV cameras. Anyway, at the same time, we decided we just wanted to do everything around Bristol we could find, and so we tackled the Pill Path. Now, not all of you, I trust all of you, have been down the Pill Path in your lifetimes, but if you were here in 1980, when you got to the 4-arch viaduct, it was just mud. There was nothing there. You might not know, but we had to cut by hand around some of the rocky cliffs to get a path through. And now you go around and you think, oh, that's good, but it was all done by hand. Now this was done with the yacht team. Now the yacht teams were only 16-year-olds, and there were 10 of them in the team, and they weren't being fed properly either. So the first thing we did, we had a sack of potatoes on the 4 arches, had a fire, gave them potatoes, and away they went. We had a little dumper. We had to build a brand new road down through Lee Woods. Some of you may know it comes down from Lee Woods to near the viaduct, just to bring the stone in. We had a problem with a tramp in the woods who twice came down and menaced the young lads, threw them off and drove the dumpers into the river. So that was standard. But we've still got a lovely path at the end. All the railings came from the boiler tubes of Southmead Hospital, which was being decommissioned at the time. And so these railings, which are 4 inches in diameter in old terms, became our standard. And if you go down there now, you'll see they're nicely pitted from sort of hospital, whatever goes on in hospitals. And again, we used forced labour, but I think that was very well. And again, we had a party on the path. I think that's you. Is Jim here? I don't know. Anyway, there's various children and things we all know about. Another of George's circles. The triumphant ride. And that was unwalkable. Although it was a public footpath, you could not walk down it. It was just matted grass before we came. And this was the team. You may remember Walter Graves, some of you have been around. He was our chairman at the time. And I'll come back to this photograph later because it was really this team and the people who were working with it who delivered the start of so much that was to come. Anyway, whilst that was going on, by the way, we didn't always build it very well. We built the causeway too low. And so the first high tide that came over flooded it, and we had to raise it by about another foot. The other one we tackled was the Kennishaven Canal, and the clerk of Barthampton Parish Council rang me up and said, look, could you do the canal towpath? Because in the summer it's just hard ruts, in the winter it's soggy mud, and I want people in my parish to be able to walk into Bath. So in the winter it looked like that into Bath. So again, we put a team on. Now, this team, there were 10 people, and they worked, 20 people, they worked for 4 years and went all the way from Bath to Devizes. And the first thing we had to do with this team is each new group that came in, the supervisor drove a dumper into the canal. They were taught how to winch a dumper out to get it over. And this actually happened 3 times. Once the driver claimed he was attacked by sword bees. Another time a tornado fighter from Larkhill, wherever, swept down the Golden Valley on a test run. He thought his dumper was exploding, so he leapt into the canal. And the third time the canal bank collapsed. So it was worthwhile training, and you'll see the path's nicely built, slightly above the ground level to drain. And the net result is we had that lovely path, which probably many of you have used, hugely popular, particularly walkers. And when you get further out towards Dundas and Avencliff, you're avoiding the main road to Warminster, which I'm sure you all know is a horrible place to be. And this remains a very popular path, and it's now part of a circle which goes around the 2 tunnels. Now, at the same time, we were starting to think about landscaping and sculpture, and this was our first effort. This gateway cost £3 to build, and that was the cost of the screws that put it together, because the rest came out of the skip. And you'll see it's commemorating 79 to 87. But we got on doing rather more sculpture. Gordon Young did the Centurion. Some of you will know him. Now, the Centurion is exactly on the centre line of the Roman road that went from Seamills to Bath. And you'll see even the seats are carved to look like Roman something, so the fallen columns. At the station, Warmley Station, Stephen Joyce, he did these wonderful laser cutouts, which are still there. There was a lecturer at the Art College who was American, and he fancied doing something that related to the American prairies, and this is on the way to Yate. And at Mangotsfield Station, and some of you will know the history of Mangotsfield Station, there was a huge glass canopy roof held up by numerous cast iron columns, but they'd all been smashed. And so Nicholas Stinchcombe put some money together. We dug out all the foundations, and every one of these trees is where there was a cast iron column. So at Mangotsfield, we're trying to reproduce the glass roof, of course, in leaves, but the formation is what you would have seen when it was an important junction with the Midland Railway. And Katie Hallett did these windows in this wall here. And I'm very proud of the wall because we bought it for £5, and in buying it, we turned the political tables in Kingswood, because what happened, there was a meeting, and a number of councillors apparently went into the room and they decided they were going to demolish these walls at Mangotsfield. And a reporter for the Post overheard it, he ran out, he rang me up, I banged an offer for £5, went public, they had to accept it, the chairman of the council resigned, and it changed parties. So, that's really good. So these commemorate that. I'm going back to this picture because this picture is really important, because on this day, one of our colleagues got hold of the Minister of Transport and his wife and children and said, why didn't you come down and enjoy this path, and you see it's very popular. Well, of course, we told everybody that existed that the Minister was coming and coming on the path. And it worked really, really well, except that everyone stopped this guy and said, oh, you're the Minister. Anyway, he then said, right, fine, I want you to look at all the district railways in England and Wales. And so again, the Cyclebag team got together, and we went over the whole of England and Wales in one summer. And we were pretty cynical about the government, really, because we didn't think the Tories did much in those days. So we got HMS, this is an HMSO publication, 1982, and we got them to print 33 appendices. Each appendix was a detailed route. And we reasoned that if we got those into the public, it would give us plenty of work to do for the next few years. And so this again is the tunnel, our famous tunnel at Staple Hill, the first tunnel I ever went through with a path, which was on the front cover of the study. And crucially, in the technical section, we described the work on the Bitton to Bath path and the work on the Pill path. And these, if you like, are the two technical pages in this HMS study. Anyway, we then trundled off around the country building any routes that we covered in this study. And this is the path from Plymouth up to Dartmoor. Anyone been on that? And if you're a keen railway buff, these are Brunel's original columns when he had the timber trestles. And again, we had a team of about 100 people. And I always remember the Plymouth Health and Safety Officer coming out and saying, where are your washing facilities, where are your toilets? And I remember pointing to the river. Anyway, the team had to rebuild the parapets. And again, these were 18-year-olds working under supervision. We were very lucky on this programme. For every 10 people we had working, we were given one supervisor. And many of those supervisors went on to work for us full time. Another one was right through the middle of Cheltenham. This bridge was actually built later when they did the development, but this was actually built in 1983. And I'm always very fond of this picture because the Churchill Gardens there, on the day of persuading the council to let us do it, they were doing the trial run for the Britain in Bloom competition. So we were all taken into this marquee and given a trial lunch and trial champagne and trial. Anyway, we were walking along this viaduct, which is about as high as this room, in a rather woozy state, and I decided I'd have a look underneath it, so I grabbed the first tree, and instead of breaking, thankfully it bent in a gentle arc and deposited me on this grass. So I would be very, very fond of that particular point. Swindon down to Marlborough was another wonderful route we built, and this was built with probation, people on probation. Anyway, so by 1984, and if we're rushing through here, we're just about doing it, by 1984, we got quite a little menu of things built. but they were all leased or borrowed or begged, in one or two cases stolen, and we didn't really have a very good legal basis, but we did have this small trading company, Sustainable Transport, which bought the stones on. Anyway, one day in 1984, the Countryside Commission in Leeds rang me up and said, look, we've got a real problem in Yorkshire. The Selby coal mine has closed the main Flying Scotsman route from Selby to York and built a new diversion. We want the councils to buy it for a path. York hates Selby and Selby hates York, so we're not getting it. Will you buy it? So I said, yeah, of course I'll buy it. And I rang up the railways that afternoon and agreed to buy it for £1. Now this is 5 miles long, huge amount of land, but of course we said this bridge was a major liability, which of course it isn't really for people, it might have been for trains. So it all ended up as £1. They wouldn't sell us the rails because they would have been really valuable, so they nicked the rails back, but they left all the ballast. And there was a contractor about to start building a bypass around York. We sold all the ballast to the contractor, only time I built a road, and that gave us enough money to build the whole path, concrete the bridge and so on. So we managed to do it all for nothing with another of these magnificent teams of 100 people. And this team was one of the best we ever had, except I'd grown up in the Mendes with carboniferous limestone. This limestone is magnesium limestone, which isn't frostproof. So it took me a winter to learn that one. And we also had a wonderful supervisor here who pinned all of my beautiful drawings up on his shed. But he was a hunter, and he hunted rabbits, and he hooked all the rabbits on the pegs above the drawings. So when I turned up one day, all my drawings had this sheet of blood on them, and all you could see was a little bit at the bottom. He was working without drawings. The same year, 1984, we bought the Derby to Melbourne line. This is Swogston Viaduct, and as you know, history is where Bonnie Prince Charlie turned back. He decided not to go into London, Swogston. We bought 3 railways in southwest of Glasgow, beautiful, beautiful railways. And I'm very fond of the Lochwinnock Loop line because you see that one's concrete and this one's stone. And I'm absolutely convinced the engineer went to France for summer holidays and came roaring back and said, look guys, in the continent they build things in concrete, because the bridges sort of changed. And we bought the Consett and Sunderland line, which was 40 kilometres of line in County Durham. And this was very significant because it crossed 3 boundaries. It went from very high in the Pennines through very deprived towns which had lost their mining, their coal mining and their steelworks. And we also had Northern Arts who were very keen on sculpture. And they had just done a sculpture park in Grisdale, some of you may know. And the guy in Northern Arts felt all the artists in Grisdale owed him a favour. So they all ordered their brigade to do something. This one was interesting because the electricity board wanted to put a cable across our land and they sent me a document for 50p. Annual rent 50p. I wrote to the chairman and said, this is absolutely disgusting and outrageous, we're a charity, He said, oh, what am I going to do about it? I said, I want to send our artists into a workshop, I want you to give me all the old transformers you've got, a welding kit and so on. And David Kemp, who's an artist in Cornwall, he welded up a steel worker and a coal worker, because this was halfway between Stanley and Consett, the 2 towns. And we asked the planners and we said, look, do we need planning permission for this? And they said, no, don't bother about planning because the council never agree on art. They never do, you probably know that. Very good about planning. So we said, we'll put them in a cutting their outer site. Absolutely fine. Except that morning, the low loader came out from Newcastle with these sculptures in the back, followed by Newcastle TV motorcyclists beaming live tones of this. The council stopped the work at about 10 o'clock, there's a crane here and everything. They ordered the artist in for 12 o'clock, and by 1 o'clock they were literally, I'm told, weeping that they had doubted him. 2 o'clock they were in. So we also did quite a lot with gas cylinders. This was a homage to the 9th Legion, which was, decimated north of the Clyde. Gas bottles, bits and pieces for old railways. That was good fun. A lot of work with scrap on animals, scrap cows when we were selling Matthews, who's the vet's daughter. Oh, I forgot to say, this was a monument to Chris Hutt, who was one of our secretaries, who died untimely. And this is just on the path actually at Warmley. If those of you have seen, I just do like the details of this particular monument to the death of the motor car, really, I suppose. And then we did a very, very big piece with David Mack up in Consett. This is stainless steel theodolite and level. And these were the two instruments, of course, which set out the Industrial Revolution. And this is on the site of the Consett Steelworks. They become the symbol of Consett. They're on the front cover of the Ordnance Survey maps and so on. And they cost an awful lot of money. Andy Goldsworthy turned up and he did some of his biggest earthworks here. This is on the main line of the route. It looks like that when you're cycling through. But it's quite interesting because it's above a coal mine, and in County Durham there are more miles of road underground than there are above ground. The extent the coal mines were so extensive. And then further down near the main line, he did this worm. Now this was quite remarkable really, because he just turned up one day in the snow. He did a model of this in the snow. He didn't do a drawing, and he showed it to the digger driver and said, "I'll do it." Anyway, after he'd done that, he went to the nearest pub and discovered it was called the Lambton Worm. He didn't know about it because he came from Cumbria. And the Lambton Worm story is this rather sad one where somebody promised, a knight promised that if his son came back safely from the Holy Wars, he would kill the first thing he saw as a recompense, and he'd arranged for his dog to be let out first. But the son rushed up to meet him, got there first, and forever after, Lambton, the family of Lambton, apparently been cursed then, they had proper children or anything like that. So I really like the Lambton Worm. It's got this wonderful sort of rhythm to it. And we paid for all this by saying that this was drainage works. Because we had a drainage budget, but we didn't do any drainage, but we had no sculpture budget. So this was a drainage work. Well, you can see these days it's sort of, stopping the floods and all that sort of thing. Anyway, once we ran out of work there, we thought, right, we'll go to the top of England, and this is the summit of the Pennines, and we've been working with groundwork in West Cumbria, where we bought 40 kilometres of railway, and groundwork had done a brilliant job building the paths there, so we decided we'd string them all together and build a route right across the country, which we call the sea-to-sea route. And to this day, you can go into the harbour at Whitehead and you can fill your water bottle up with irrigated water from the Irish Sea, so it's just down the corner, and tip it all over into the North Sea. And we get to the other end. And we then put together a few more long routes. Anyway, by 1992, the red bits of stuff were the stuff that Cyclebag, and I should say in 1984 we got the York route. We had to set up a charity, we called that Sustrans. So from 1984 to 1984 to 92, we were working as a charity based in 35 King Street, if you remember that. And all these red pieces we had built to that time. We had begun to string various routes together. That's the sea-to-sea route. This is the Trans-Pennine Trail. This is the Welsh route, and so on. And we had this idea that we would try and gradually use these routes to get better and better facilities in the towns. Now, it's quite important, so we were in the position by the sort of mid-90s of having quite a lot of work done. By the way, this is the bridge at York when it was finished. And so by 95, when the lottery was set up, we thought we'd have a bid for it, and if you remember, the top price was 50 million. And we thought we wouldn't go for that, we'd go for 42 million because that was the answer to everything in Hitchcock's Galaxy. And we basically put this map to them, so we would open the orange routes, which were minor roads and traffic-free stuff, by 2000, and another one by 2005. And we had a lot of problems here because, for instance, if you look at Berwick-on-Tweed, which is up here, we originally didn't go through Berwick-on-Tweed. If you remember here, we don't go through Berwick-on-Tweed, which is up there. And we had a letter, I promised you, from the Mayor of Berwick-on-Tweed that said, you do know that the traditional route to Edinburgh goes to Berwick-on-Tweed. You do know that all traitors hung dawn and quarter, a quarter of them is hung on the gates of Berwick. You do know that, don't you? And so I went to see this guy, and agreed we'd go to Berks. We didn't want that to happen. And I always remember it was in the rain, and his hair was bright red, and it was dyed. And there were these red dribbles. So that's very concrete for you. Anyway, and we called that the National Cycle Network. And we had 2 huge rides which were organised, one from Inverness to Land's End, sorry, John O'Groats to Land's End, and another from Belfast to Dover. And the idea of that was we'd get every single council along the way to sign up. This was during the summer of '95. We'd get every single MP to sign up. The only MP that didn't sign was MP for Penrith and Cumbria, because he said, I haven't got a motorway in my constituency, and I'm not going to agree to the cycle route until I get to a motorway. So everybody else signed. We got to Land's End, of course, and we were the first people to be given an award. I have to say, we were rung up on a Friday, and they said, we're quite keen on your scheme, but you haven't got anything in Ireland, because we didn't have anybody in Ireland. But we had 2 friends between us we found in Ireland, rang them up on a Friday, and we said, we want the proposals in Ireland by Monday morning. So they went in. And so Meatloaf gave me this cheque for 43.5, which was the extra cost. And I have to say, at the same time, I met Meatloaf, but it was really useful to have it. And then the councils quadrupled that with match funding, with other millennium goals. So altogether, we spent nearly £200 million over those 5 years on trying to build better things for walkers and cyclists. And the very, very first grant that was awarded, is Simon here? I don't know if Simon at the back. Simon ran all this scheme, by the way. Simon Talbot must be at the back. And he kept a watch on it all. He kept us all in order. And the very, very first grant, I think, Simon, you did, was to widen the gap that blocked the chocolate box walk. And I'll just show you that's what it was like before we gave the grant. So the very first drawdown from the Millennium Grant to that 43 million was to get the chocolate box walk open. Anyway, I won't go through too much of it because you don't really want to know what was happening in deepest Belfast and things, but in this sort of area we did a lot of work pioneering the routes by what we call trailblazing rides, and we took loads of people down the routes before they'd been built. And I remember this particular one was from Frome to Radstock. You can still see the track there. And at one stage we had to go through a complete copse of rat-race. Everybody, 90, 100 people, were just bleeding. And we got to Radstock Town Hall, stood in a circle, Mayor was in the middle giving us cakes or something. Everybody was just dripping blood. It was just so impressive. He was very pleased. And we also tried, Simon, you did something? This is the finished path, but we also tried the genome, which we had a Nobel Prize winner in Cambridge, Professor Saltster, and he had worked out the genome for one of the breast cancer problems, and it had 10,036 elements to it. So on the opening in Cambridge in the year 2000, we put 10,036 stripes, and they had to be in precisely the right order. He said if you get a single stripe wrong, then the person dies. Anyway, this was the trial to see how it worked. We had some that were less successful. This was pioneering the route over the Avon in Devon. It was generally reckoned to be a rather bad idea. This was coming down through the Great Glens, and this is one of the bridges that were built after Jacobite rebellions. And we, in fact, then eventually repaired that bridge to go to the top near Avigal. We did a big ride over Salisbury Plains, and we made absolutely sure the army saw us. Because we went over during live firing. And we also had a lot of work camps. We had about 40 work camps, and I can't cover them all, but one of my favourite ones was Loch Venacha, which is near Callendon, Scotland, mainly accessible by water. Every morning there was a guy the other side of the loch, over that side, who was practicing the bagpipes. He was a terrible player, and his wife had exiled him. But we quite liked from a distance. All this work, 3 kilometres, done entirely by hand, and we lived in the top floor of Lord Thompson's shooting lodge, which was close by. And that's the finished path. And again, if you've cycled from Glasgow northwards, you will have used this. Borderic to Chedzoy, down in this part of the world. In 2 weeks we built 2 kilometres of path, and that was really, really great fun. That's the pancake course. We built the route down to Nailsea at Fayard at Flaxporton. We recognised some people there. And so we always had a week in which to build this stuff. It was our challenge. Can we get a kilometre or 2 weeks? And that was a sort of a rigor team photo at the end. But when people look at these photos historically, I think it's really wonderful to think that there's people like this who actually created these new bits of fabric, bits of parks, worlds that we can all live with. There were a lot of bridges, of course. This was the bridge of the Fournier Con. This was the bridge at York, often funded by different Millennium teams. This was the Lancaster Millennium Bridge that took you down to Morecambe. So none of these bridges existed. This is the Blinking Eye Bridge at Newcastle. I don't know if you've seen it work, but so that's how it works. And all these, of course, what they were doing, they were giving a priority route to walking and cycling. And that's why bridges are so important. In Bristol, in recent years, we've lost some of the bridges over the cut. Major problem. We did loads of seats, we did hundreds of seats, because the disabled told us we needed seats everywhere. Some of these seats were designed by students at Tame, one of the furniture colleges. We used junk, that was the railway sleepers over at Whitehaven, and that's my favourite seat because there used to be 2 rails there, and where the beams hit the ground was exactly where the rails were, so it's like the railways exploded. Katie did a number of these mosaic seats on the Tarka Trail down in Devon, and this one near the Avon Bridge, in fact there's a memorial, some of you may remember that 4 workers unfortunately were killed repairing this bridge, and so this spanner and Hannah was our memorial to them. Signing, I mustn't overlook signing because Simon just loves signing, but without Simon's ability to get the Department of Transport to agree that we could put signs up of volunteers, the routes wouldn't be complete. So altogether I think there were 2,000 or 3,000 volunteers around the country who put on ranger badges and kept the routes intact. And if any of you are here, I'm really grateful because I still need those. Our bank gave us 1,000 Millennium mileposts, and in the top here, something wrong with this. At the top, you'll see a black disc where there's a time trail, and you can take a paper rubbing of that, and all the mileposts have different ones, and you can assemble them into geometric solids. And if you get them all right, apparently according to the designer, there's a field somewhere in Northamptonshire where if you lie down a certain day, the stars are arrayed in such a way, and if you can do that, you win the prize. So that was just one prize. And on lots of openings. This is coming in to Nethley, where we built through the dunes. This is opening at Chippenham to Calne. And so by the time we got to the year 2000, we had actually managed 5,000 miles. And strange things happened, like inadvertently, we didn't know, because we just drew this on a map, so to speak, but this route went past the chairman of Suffolk County Council's house. And he called his guys in and he said, look, I want, on the year 2000, I want this route past my house to be opened. And so we realised that running past the houses is important people, very important part of the route. And then when we got to 21st of June, which was the day we said we would open, we decided we'd try and cycle the whole 10,000 miles which we built and had in mind. And 258 groups of cyclists set off. And I remember Sue here and we packed up 258 envelopes with different colour flags in so that we could work out who was where. This is coming over the Royal Borders Bridge in Scotland. This is the team that went up from Bristol to Hereford. You see the gold and white, you know it's them. And of course, in the middle of Bristol, we had a big ride over Perry's Bridge. The next few years, we were sort of consolidating, but then the lottery put up another offer of £50 million, and again we bid for that with a thing called Connect 2, and we wanted to put in place 50 missing pieces that made it impossible to cycle the wall. And this is in Southampton up the Itchen, and this was a public vote thing, which was a nightmare, frankly. But anyway, so we sent these flags all around the country to photograph the routes that we were planning to do. And if you go to Southampton, you'll see that was built. And of course, the two tunnels route was funded through that. So South Trams won another 50 million there. Whilst this was going on, there were a few other little things. I just want to point this one out in Constitution Hill, because a few of us got together to build this. It was a bombed-out shop. There was a wall at the back which Southtrams bought for £50, and the street all got together to build this sort of ramp. Now, I only did a pencil drawing for this, and the council said you can't get planning consent on a pencil drawing. It's got to be a computer-generated drawing. I said I can't do that, and Helen Hodden, who's the chairman of the council, is opening it in 2 weeks' time. We got planning permission the next day, and we started work. And he also said it's too steep. It's got to be 1 in 20. I said, but the hill, Constitution Hill, is 1 in 7, and this is 1 in 7, so they gave it on that too. So this is just a few pictures, but it's one of the nicest things I've ever been involved in, and we built that ramp in 2 working days. So then we moved on to the next phase of my work. I left Southtrams, and I still live in Clifton. I've been here now 50 years, and I was a local person, and I was part of this group which gazed longingly at Weston-super-Mare, Brean Down. And you couldn't get to Brean Down 10 years ago because the ferry, which some of you will remember, wasn't a very good one. When the ferryman died, the ferry died. Probably should have been closed before he died, because I was there once and our station came off the ferry and 5 people fell into the mud. So our station went off the plank. Anyway, we'd long wanted to build, for 20 years, we wanted to build a route across the sluices, which are down at the bottom here. But the problem was, that side's North Somerset and this side is Somerset, and they didn't talk to each other. I went to a meeting North Somerset had with Somerset in Taunton, and the lady who was running the meeting for Somerset said, before we start, I want you to know that if this meeting is going to continue, you have to pay us £100,000 just to have the meeting. We both walked out of the room, and North Somerset said, look, we've got to tackle this. We're not allowed to buy land in Somerset outside. So Caroline here, who was a trustee of Southtrams, she and I teamed together to create a new working charity which we call Greenways. We worked very closely with North Somerset. I hope there's no one from North Somerset here, because the engineer, not this engineer, but another engineer, he siphoned money off a roundabout to build this scheme. We had a work camp, 2 work camps actually, and built the path. We had to build this massive wall, the great bird wall of green, because of redshanks. And KTR artists didn't want to do a boring, so up and down along them. So the idea of this was a load of flotsam that had just been chucked up. And it worked really, really well, still there well, but we did an awful lot of comments about how you've forgotten all that and all that sort of there was the usual opening. This is the Lord Lieutenant of Somerset, Annie at the time, and of course we had a sort of opening ride. However, we've never cracked the route from Brean to Berne, and so to this day it's signed down the sands, because all the way past what was Pontins and now it's St. Point and so on, really, really difficult to do. And then we're stuck by the golf course. We had the money to build the whole way down the side of the road by the golf course, but they wouldn't let us have a 3-metre strip. Heapy, who was the MP, we met him, he said, I'm very sympathetic, but my first priority is to get first-class flights from New York to Bristol to improve the status of the airport. When that happens, I'll support your cycle route. Fortunately, it's not there now. The next scheme we tackled was the Wye Valley from Tinton to Chepstow. Now, Cyclebag had surveyed this in 1981. but we couldn't somehow make it click. It's 8 kilometres, it goes through spectacular countryside, and it goes through the Tidman Tunnel, which is 1,100 metres long, lots of bats. This is special area of conservation, triple SI, you name it. Very sensitive area. Anyway, thanks to Caroline, she negotiated all that through with Natural England, and we did the work. We had to lift all the rails out, and it's quite a small tunnel, so that was quite a tough job. We ran the tarmac machines through, and this was an extraordinary experience. But one side you were freezing cold, and the other side you were boiling hot. The lighting. We had a work camp, and in 9 days we designed and built and installed all the lighting. 3 kilometres of cable, 140 lights, the whole lot. And at the last Sunday switched on, and amazingly it worked. The lighting had been quite low. How many people have been through Tidman Tunnel? Quite a few, yeah. Well, the reason why it's so low is because of bats. We're only allowed to have 1 lumen at the middle point. We had to do spatial analysis and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, it's 6 months. It's only open 6 months a year, but we utterly rely on volunteers because our licence doesn't allow us to go through at night. So there's a rota of volunteers for 6 months, and they go and close the tunnel gates every night. They open automatically. And believe it or not, there's competition for that because the children love going through the tunnel in pitch darkness once the lights are on. There was also a big landslip. A big landslip. Where we got to? Sorry, there was a very big landslip which had covered the railway path here due to other factors. And our consultant said it would be £250,000 to even look at it. So we sent an excavator in, and he didn't come back that night. And I was really worried he'd fallen down the hill into the river or something. But I went down in the dark and found him still working, and he cleared the whole landscape in 1 day. So we're talking about £300 or £400. Poof, gone. And we used all the local rocks to build revetments, and the rocks going up there. And we've been watching it for 4 years now, and there's not been any slips at all. So for £400, you could afford to do it again, couldn't you? Now another one you'll know is the route through the Ashton Park from the Art College, and we built that during COVID. And this is in a Grade 2 listed landscape. But these trees were planted in the 30s. They weren't planted by Humphrey Repton, and they actually obscured the view. So people were quite pleased we thinned the trees out. Because it's going over tree roots, we always build what's called tree cell, which is this honeycomb structure. It lets air get into the roots, and it prevents the path changing. And we had a lovely path, nice shape just before the opening, and that's how it is today. And we had a letter from Humphrey Repton's biographer who said Repton would have really liked this path because he built all his parks for wheelchair people 200 years ago. So we feel quite proud of that. And this is maintained by volunteers, and one of the things we've been doing is cutting 3 windows in the wood, so that when you stand on the door of Ashton Park Mansion, you can look through and get the feeling of the whole park, because the listed park actually includes the school playing fields. But these trees, especially in the summer, blocked that view. So you didn't have that long view. We're nearly at the end now, you'll be pleased in 50 minutes, and our current project is to put together this Somerset Circle, where we're working with lots of people, and the green line, of course, is the one we're fairly familiar with. And this is the 2 tunnels project here, Kenneth Naden Canal, through to Frome. This is the Greendown Way. This is the peer-to-peer route, which then opened this summer. Now, we started negotiating that in 1979. And the farmer, just before he died, about 40 years later, he said, I think I better sign this before I die. Anyway, it's a brilliant route if you want to go from Cleveland to Weston. And so we've been focused on this part of the Mendix. And this was possible because we had an absolutely brilliant officer in the Mendix called Kelly. She'd never done any of this work before, so she didn't have a clue. and she wasn't sort of hidebound in any way. She was just told to build it, and she built it. So the first one we built 3 years ago was at Dulcote, above Wales Cathedral there. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And we do have a problem actually, these trees are growing up, they're on somebody else's property. So if anybody feels like joining us one night to do a felling operation, because they're growing up and hiding our view. So we've got to do something about that. The biggest single gap is between Westbury, Submendip and Easton, which is approaching Wells, where there are no minor roads between these settlements. There's no pavement beside the road, appalling road. But fortunately, there's this disused railway which belonged to church commissioners, and they gave it to us. And fortunately, there's this bridge under the main road. Now, this bridge, in fact, I had bought this bridge way back in about the year 2000 in the hope that we'd get through one day. So, the first thing we built, the first bit in church commissioner land, and then there are these amazing, I cannot say enough, there are amazing teams of volunteers. There are 5 teams of volunteers in Mendix. They do the most extraordinary work, and this team completely cleared this cutting. There's the bridge, and you have to clear these things before the end of February, of course, birdnesting. And the cutting at the far end had been blocked, so we used heavy machinery. And this I love because the old railway ran into grade into 1 in 49. But for a variety of reasons, we had to go at 1 in 20, so we were cutting down into the solid rock. This was our only neighbour. She was very worried, but we gave her a sponge cake and we said we should be no windows. She was our friend all the time. And this was what the finished path looked like with these vertical faces of the conglomerate actually. We had to build a special bridge for the farmer because it went straight to the middle of his field. And so I built my favourite bridge, which is railway sleepers and steel frame. It takes 40-ton loads. And just in case you want to know how we do all this, we're a tiny group of volunteers really. Everything's done on the basis of pencil drawings. There's nothing computerised at all really in our work. And so then there was a big opening, of course. A bit further on by the recycling works at Dulcote, we had to go around the back of the works because the railway was there. Our contractor removed all this and built a big ramp, and we were given 1 day to put this fence in, and this gang of volunteers put it in a single day with a few people from Clifton. The next year we built a long dry stone wall for the duchy near Shepton Mallet. These are all our annual work camps. You can come this year in September if you want to join in. Year before last, we had to cast 300 of these concrete coping stones for our viaducts, and they're quite big and they're very heavy. And this amazing team of mostly ladies, I should say, because they're particular about these things, built and had to cast 50 a day for 6 days. And this is the volunteers repairing the copings on Hamwood Viaduct, and this was before we built the copings on Bath Road. And I should say, my brother and sister-in-law, they do all the food. You can't possibly run camps without loads of food. So just to end up with this year, we did 2 things. We built a path from the central Shepton Mallet to the viaduct, or the start of it. And we built the sensitive bit, which was through a cemetery. And we were only 4 feet, 1.5 metres, from a very recent grave of a 9-year-old girl. 9-day-old, sorry. Very, very sensitive, but the parents were very supportive. And it was sort of mud, and some of you may know Andrea in the wine shop next door. We had to build a lot of gabling work. There's a steel pergola which eventually be covered in plants. There are new benches all the way along looking out over the cemetery. There's the grave. And this is where we reached after 9 days of work. So we've done the really sensitive bit. The other side of Shepton, we did another piece of work which is really interesting. The railway line, 1966 beach enclosure, the bridge went 13 foot. We had put a new bridge in at 20 foot, which is about that height. And this is what it looked like just before the work camp. Very, very busy road. First day of the work camp, we started work on both sides. We had 9 days to concrete the 2 abutments, which were 2 metres high, this sort of height. So the foundations went in on the first day, and this is the team that built the shuttering, just finished pouring the concrete of the second one. So this is all amazing work really for volunteers. No one had ever done of this, the steel reinforcing, the shuttering, the concreting work, all went beautifully. And there were long approaches which had to be built up in gauges because we would gain that extra 2 metres. 3 weeks later the bridge came in, it came in from Huddersfield. I got a lot of flack because apparently this was now a liberal Lib Dem area. Why had I got a blue bridge? Real trouble. Bridge went in, and miracle of miracles, it fitted perfectly, and that was just a few hours later when the road was open. So we did 2 big pieces of work this year, and really everyone, I think 350 working days in 9 days. So then just to end up coming all the way back to Bristol, this Bristol Bridge, just to say the campaigning that started all those years ago in 1977, we are beginning far too late. So now, of course, then we were worried about oil running out, now we're worried about far too much oil and so on, we'll keep it on the ground. But Bristol Bridge space has been won back from traffic for cyclists. Only last week, Baines in South Gloucestershire announced, put a planning application in for a new bridge over the River Hannon. So when that's in, you'll be able to walk and cycle from the centre of Bristol, down the river, up the River Avon, over to Keynsham, having stopped at the pub, so hang on if you want. And then, of course, right outside the door, we've got this great example of traffic calming, and I think it's this month or next month, the permanent work is starting. So really, just to finish, going back, all this stuff that within the whole country, the whole of the national network, it really all started here in Bristol, at this end of Bristol really, with people like this. Some of them are you, and if they are you, I'm really grateful. And that's what we built together. So thank you very much.